And the first story I'm going to do is Ticket to Heaven by Shirley. I never really wanted to go to heaven, but I knew someone would make me. There was pressure on me to go there. To heaven. Starting the morning, I met Pik. "Barry," Ganek said when I dragged myself into his office. "Meet Frank Pik, director of Club Eden." "Hey," I said. "How you doing?" I smiled woodenly, shook Pik's hand mechanically. You have to understand that it was 3:30. I've been in the office since 9, this not being one of your breezy, we're all chums advertising agency where the idea men are permitted to be prima donnas. I've spent the morning thinking of ways to convince the public it needs M brand hamburger enhancer. Of course, we'd end up explaining to the world that the 3 M's should stand for as in good. Any jackass could have come up with the same thing. M could have saved a bundle on an advertising agency. But agencies like mine thrive on the bad habits of industry. I spent lunch flattering Jemmy Sorgensen from Mapplethorpe and Sorgensen in the hopes that she'd offer me a job at a better salary and maybe residuals. I'd spent the first part of the afternoon thinking of ways to convince the public it needed a certain artificial sweetener, one only mildly carcinogenic. And by 3, after a hard day of constructing artful lies and fighting the tides of self-disgust, I was burnt, looking at the world through glazed eyes. By 3:15, everything in the office was flat and two-dimensional, threatening to fall down into 1D. By 3:30, some mysterious temporal voodoo arrests the clock. The pace of time becomes a hunchbacked old lady with an aluminum walker. And that's when Ganek called me in to meet Pik. Pik was a middle-aged guy with a smallish head, chipmunk cheeks, a seemingly infinite wealth of smile lines around his mouth and eyes. He smiled a lot, mostly with his mouth slightly open, looking goofy with his overbite. He was tall, round-shouldered, wore dander-flecked wire rims. He had a nice blue and dove-gray Pierre Hayakawa designer suit and immaculate patent leather shoes. I didn't notice all this at first, only a spongy handshake and a sort of Pik-shaped blur. Could have been part of the furniture. Ganek, my boss, was sitting behind his desk in shirt sleeves on his special chair to make him less midgety-ish. His high forehead was a little less furrowed than usual, his small shoulders almost relaxed, his darting black eyes for once relatively stationary. Ganek was happy about something. Pik must represent a juicy account. I screwed my smile down into something faint but superficially warm and sat across from Pik where I could look out the window at the chill, brittle spires of Manhattan's petrified forest. Petrified, I thought. Me too. "Coffee, Barry?" Ganek asked me. "No, thanks." "He doesn't need coffee," Ganek said, pretend confidingly to Pik, "or any other stimulant. Barry Thorpe runs on adrenaline." He grinned to soften the sarcasm. I must have looked more wooden than I thought. Pik tried to get the joke and blinked at the two of us. "Oh, Ganek said. "Barry, Club Eden's Paradise Vacations is our new account. I guess you've heard rumors." I hadn't heard a word. "And it's something a little, unusual. Since you, Barry, are a little, unusual." He paused for everyone to chuckle, so we did. "Thought you ought to head this up." He beamed, and I tried to look pleased. It was as if the string operating the muscles of my face were stretched out, threadbare, because I couldn't quite manage the expression I wanted. "You okay, Barry?" Ganek asked. "Just tired." I summoned a little focus, a little animation. "Well, have we got a prospectus or a press kit or video?" "Video of," Pik asked. "The resorts, or there aren't any resorts." Pik brought his hands together as if he'd clapped them and then did a sort of joyful ringing instead, shifting in his chair, and said a little impishly, "Club Eden doesn't send people to anywhere on this planet, Barry." It was my turn to blink in confusion, where the room jumped into sharp focus. They had my attention. I turned to Ganek. "Correct me if I'm wrong. I know I'm a little out of it at times. Did I lose 20 or 30 years somewhere? Are we in the next century all of a sudden? Last I knew it was just 2016. I'm sure of it. Interplanetary travel is still unmanned, right?" "It's a manner of speaking. We're not sending people to another planet per se," Pik explained. "We're sending them to another existential focal point, another plane, to use the metaphysical jargon. We send them to heaven." I looked at Pik and then at Ganek. "Heaven. Some kind of sense-around laser show, huh? 360-degree screen, incense, Yannick said, "Nope. They put you in a machine and you really feel physically like you've gone someplace. Sort of mind trip through, I guess, some kind of electronic stimulation of the brain," or he shot a glance of polite inquiry at Pik. Pik hemmed, getting ready to ha. If you like, you can look at it like that." He glanced up at me. "It'd really help if you went there, yourself. Then you'd accept it." He looked embarrassed, stared at his reflection in his shoes, and his mouth was shut, as much as it would shut with his overbite. All of a sudden, he worried me. The next day was Saturday. Under the business incentive labor laws, most of the population had to work on Saturday, but not me. I could putter around my weekend house with a drink in my hand. Getting gloomier as I got drunker, opaquing the windows and dialing the lights low, enjoying the gloom, hugging the house's darkness, thinking about the Club Eden demonstration I was supposed to go to on Monday. "We send them to heaven," Pik had said. Neurological heaven, I supposed. Some pleasure-inducing machine, perhaps. Heaven at Pik's prices was something only a few could afford. I shrugged. What else was new? I went to the picture window, thumbing the button, and the window glass rippled into transparency. The spring afternoon was startling, almost tastelessly garish after the artificial twilight of my house. I blinked in the unwanted sunshine, and the whiskey made my head ache. Tumbler in hand, I looked out over one of Hartford's prettiest suburbs. Trees lined the street with newly budded clouds of soft green. Here and there were the bright pom-poms of flowering fruit trees. I realized I had no idea exactly what kind of trees most of them were. I'd lived here for 5 years, and I didn't know what kind of trees were on the street, or my neighbor's first name. But I knew my neighbor was security passed. We were all security passed in Connecticut Village. You drove in, you showed the checkpoint guards your residency card or gave a visitor's number. To get a residency card to be passed, you had to have a B3 credit rating. Of course, no record as a felon. It was a closed community, but not internally gregarious. The fragmentation of true community feeling extended its anti-roots even here, where all looked cozy. We had television, we had interactive video and shopping networks, we had the net, we had our lifestyles. We shrugged off the responsibility that acknowledging strangers brings, because one stranger leads to another. Not very far beyond the checkpoint was the crumbling border of Hartford's shack town, swollen with strangers we didn't want to meet and tried not to think about. I wasn't always the model resident of Connecticut Village. I'd written some stuff for The Reformist before I'd gotten scared into money hunting, before Gannick found me. What I'd written was pretty self-righteous, foolishly idealistic stuff, like every town has its shack town, squatter enclaves growing up in the cracks between the neat little high-security urban village units the cities have become, the refuge of the legions of homeless, disenfranchised of every profession. Those who worked in industry and oil before hands-on industry became an overseas venture and oil became an obsolete energy source. Those who worked in construction before the contractors went to 75% pre-molded structures and robotics. Those without white-collar work skills. Those who'd failed to fit in with the country's biggest employer, the service industry. That great consumer supply mechanism, so like a chicken-feeding machine on a poultry ranch. The shack towns are tenanted by people who, a decade or two ago, built the affluence that the privileged feed off of now. Jobless minorities are in the shack towns, of course, and the old. Since the demographic shifts of the late 90s and the growth of geriatric medicine, the old have become a huge moldering slice of the population. Millions of them went discarded, forgotten, cold-shouldered by the post-welfare society. The fresh, new, shiny world where entrepreneurs are messiahs, where those who failed to earn are cast into the outer darkness beyond the borders of the profit margin. Stuff like that. Foolish stuff. The generalization of college journalism. Anyway, why go on about it when the response is always the same? They'll say, "So what?" And if the residency committee knew I'd written that stuff for The Reformist, I'd never have been security passed for Connecticut Village. Sometimes I passed Shack Town on the freeway, just a sort of smudgy, gray tumble of shanties glimpsed through the hurricane fence. From inside a microchip-driven car whistling smoothly down the freeway, the poor were reduced to a blur of embarrassment. The whole world became a visual shrug at 110 miles an hour. I knew there was bribery in it somewhere. I knew it when Gannick said, "The FDA has given Club Eden full approval. The Patent Bureau, everyone, they're lining up to give their blessing." It was the way he said it. quick with an undertone that warned me not to harp on the subject, so I didn't ask why there hadn't been any newspaper talk about it yet. Obviously, they'd worked hard to keep it mum till federal approval was a fait accompli. Wouldn't want any nosy Senate subcommittees to delay approval. It was Monday afternoon, and we were in what was to be the Club Eden showroom. Me, Gannick, Putchik, and Putchik's secretary, Buffy. She was a sort of a human happy face who went by Buffy with no obvious evidence of shame. The showroom had been the front office of a large travel agency. The posters and brochure racks and desks and the fat middle-aged ladies with the snail-shell hairdos had been cleared out. Now there was only the transport rig, like a hump of frozen milk under the fluorescent lights in one corner of the room, and some paint jigsawed newspapers around the freshly rollered walls. I looked at the transport rig and told myself, take it easy, it's probably harmless. It looked harmless. Looked like one of those little imitation race car seats you get into at an arcade, except on the outside it was all designer stylized, sculptured teardrop of imitation mother of pearl. The little door was open. Inside there was a chair and a few dials on a dashboard. No controls, nothing else. I asked, no helmet? Something to wire into the brain to create the illusion? Or do you just inject them with something? And I had a cough. Recent coat of freshly applied blue paint suffused the shuttered room with quivery fumes. Putchik cleared his throat. No other fixtures are necessary. It's mostly automatic. Buffy, as might be expected, was short, pert, faintly plump, auburn-haired, and dimple-cheeked. She had silver-flecked china blue eyes and stubby, pudgy white fingers awkwardly extended by 3-inch nails, blue nails with white glitter. She wore a puce jumpsuit, which was her version of a test pilot's get-up. I'm all ready, she told Gannick a trifle too eagerly. Her voice was breathy and maddeningly affected. Have you done this before, Buffy? I asked. Oh, sure, she lilted. We had a kind of test pilot guy, and before that, monkeys and pigeons. They're still using pigeons, Gannick whispered to me as she turned and climbed into the machine. She closed the door behind her. The rig started to hum. Putchik tilted his head back as if listening to some beloved song. His dirty spectacles washed out in the light. One of our big selling points, Putchik said absently, is going to be a money-back guarantee. Gannick's eyebrows shot up. Money-back guarantee? That's a big risk, Frank. I mean, everyone I've met who's tried it is enthused, but there are all kinds of people out there. Brain chemistries, metabolisms, there's no two exactly alike. If there are even 20% who don't like the experience, I can't go into all the details, Putchik said, looking at himself in his shoes again, hands in his pockets. Let's just say we are 99% confident that virtually everyone will like it. There's some risk, but it's worth it. The rig's humming had risen in pitch, and I winced as it passed out of the audible range. Felt a ripple go through me, and a tightness in my chest, a pinching at the back of my throat. For the briefest of moments I had a peculiar feeling that Buffy was all around me. It was cloying, believe me. And the room was normal again. Putchik glanced at the rig. Should be out in, 5 minutes. Vacation complete. I looked at him. What's the list price on this? Once we get rolling, $5,000 per vacation. We won't be selling the machines at all for at least a decade. And it's gimmicked so that anyone who tries to break into one to see its works will only find a glob of smoking slag inside. $5,000. I stared at him. 1,000 bills a minute? I could feel Gannick glaring at me. Don't offend the clients, the glare was telling me. Putchik was unruffled. Only objectively. Doesn't feel like 5 minutes to them. They think it's months. Depends on how subjective their personalities are. It'll feel like at least a month has passed. For some, it may feel like an eternity of pure, uninterrupted happiness. He looked at me as if to say, what do you say to that? His head tilted back, his open mouth aimed at me. If I'd looked, I could have checked out his tonsils. One of Putchik's technicians came in. He was a blond kid with a samurai haircut. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit, Club Eden, ornately stitched onto each shoulder. He sang quietly, along with something I heard only as a seashell sound leaking from his earphones. He carried a small box of microchips to the rig, snaking his head to the music. Putchik glanced at him in irritation. Chucky, it's not that rig that needs the guidance chips, it's the other one. But Chucky didn't hear him. He opened the door of the rig. It was empty. Gannick put the scotch down in front of me and said, drink it, like a doctor's command. We were in Putchick's office, and I was in Putchick's chair. He was standing solicitously over me, making a motion with his hands like a fly cleaning its foreclaws. On the other side of the desk, Gannick was glowering. His expression said, "You're making a great impression on the client, just great." But the girl was gone. "I'll be okay," I said. I felt funny for a second. I looked at Putchick and then rolled the chair back so he wasn't breathing on me. "Some kind of stage magic cabinet?" He shook his head. "She's gone, projected, sliding between planes." We were going to let people believe it was all in the head for a while. We thought they'd be too scared otherwise, but believe me, "My ears are burning," Buffy announced, giggling as she came into the room. She looked flushed, happy as a 3-year-old with a mouthful of chocolate. "I'm okay," she said. "I've been to heaven." Sometimes, alone at home, I looked at my free pass and tried to talk myself into taking the trip to heaven. Gannick wanted me to take it for promotional inspiration. Everyone else wanted to take it. All 3 of my ex-wives had called, asked me to get them passes. Tickets to heaven. Just as if they hadn't called me subhuman, cold-blooded, and other things I can't go into without my stomach knotting up. Betty and Tracy cooing at me, posing as affectionate little sisters. But Celia, of course, said, "You owe me this and more, you bastard." But I didn't go to heaven myself, not for a long time. I told myself it was because of Winslow. But no, Winslow was just an excuse. It was a good excuse because Winslow is scary. I met him 6 months after Buffy vanished and came back. It was Friday night. I was in my weekday apartment, packing up to go out to my place in Connecticut. It was a time when I least brook interruptions. So when the doorbell rang, I opened the hall door and snarled, "Yeah, what?" Then he flashed the holo. He flipped open his wallet, and a 3D Federal Eagle spread its wings in the wallet, and across its breast was a luminous banner, "Jeffrey C. Winslow, Special Agent, Food and Drug Administration." "Mr. Barry Thorpe?" Useless to deny it, right? Winslow didn't crack a smile. He was black-suited with a fashionable bureaucrat triple-tongue necktie, and he was an albino. An apparition. The ghost of bureaucracy passed, I thought, carrying an Illuminatech briefcase instead of a ball and chain. He looked at me with an expression stark as a no trespassing sign. "I'm doing a series of interviews, Mr. Thorpe, to follow up on our temporary approval of Club Eden. May I come in?" "You got the wrong guy. I'm just the barker. I don't own the carny. You want to talk to Putchick, maybe Gannick." "I've talked to them. I'll be talking to them again." He waited. "The FDA is responsible for more than food and drugs. Club Eden used a machine that affected people physically. Hence it was under their jurisdiction, and hence Winslow." Resignedly, I said, "Come on in." He was all questions, no accusations. All the questions seemed routine. "When you interview a returning vacationer for an endorsement, are they paid for the interview?" Things he already knew the answer to, till he slung this one at me underhand. "Are you aware of any sums paid by Mr. Putchick or Mr. Gannick or their representatives to agents or functionaries of the FDA?" I thought, no, they don't tell anyone but the guy they're bribing. All I said was, "No." "Thank you very much." He stood up and gave me a limp handshake. "That'll do for this time." And he left. This time? Went out to a bar, found a payphone, and called Gannick. "It's nothing," he told me. "There's a little bureaucratic power struggle at the FDA. This guy Winslow works for the guys trying to pull off the coup. They want to prove wrongdoing on the part of the FDA commissioners, take over their jobs. They got nothing. Did he ask about the charred pad effects? Corporeal side effects?" "No. What side effects are those, Gannick? I'm supposed to get the straight scoop on this stuff when Hey, we're not holding out on you. Nothing important. Don't worry about it. It's all bullshit. I got a steak burning. I gotta go. Listen, Barry, just head out to Connecticut and forget it." I knew Gannick's don't ask questions if you love your paycheck tone, so I hung up and I tried to forget about Winslow. God knows it sounded good when people described it. I was in my office, brainstorming a new 15-second spot for the Federal Broadcasting Agency's latest primetime hit, Yoshio Smith, Assassin for the CIA. Club Eden was a major sponsor for the show. I was watching a video of the writer Alejandro Buckner talking about his first Club Eden vacation. He was beaming, still an afterglow. Buckner was round-faced, and normally he looked like a sadistic Cupid. Today he was positively cherubic. Heaven is not Christian particularly. There's no biblical God in evidence, no angels, precisely. The prefects of heaven perhaps fill the bill. But heaven will satisfy the Christian, the Buddhist, and the Hindu, anyone. Some people have claimed heaven looks different for everybody, but it isn't really so. It's got a landscape, definite topographical features. It just depends on which part you tend to get projected to. And that's decided by your personality. Some people are projected into the pastoral heaven, some into the urban one, many into the one that's sort of idealized suburb. Me, I'm an unabashed urban heaven man. Well, it was a series of rooftop gardens, a sort of hanging gardens of Babylon variation of the great penthouses of Manhattan. Of course, in heaven there are no pigeon droppings. There's no smog, no acid rain. There are no thudding helicopters, screaming jets. You might see some aerial gliders, impossibly graceful. Everything has a sort of nimbus, like when you do certain drugs. When you look close, you see it's just the shine off that thing's perfection, the natural glow of its excellence. You don't get tired in heaven. Sometimes you sleep. Somehow, just when the people around you want to sleep. There are no mosquitoes, no venomous things, no maggots, no defecation, no halitosis. There is sex in heaven, however you like it. But it's more like dancing. It might lose all its earthly clumsiness. It never becomes excessive, even though the orgasms are slow, full, and not enervating. Food exudes from the tables as you need it, but you never fall into gluttony. You cannot break your bones. You cannot fall ill. Nothing dies. Everything is easy, but nothing is dull. There are no conversational dullards, no faux pas or awkward silences. There are sharp smells and soft smells, but no bad smells. I say again that heaven is not in the least dull. There are storms and there is snow, only when everyone's in the mood. There is contention there, but never acrimony. All contention is glorious sport in heaven. It can't be that perfect, I thought. I didn't want it to be. Perfection is suspicious, is improbable, and I wanted heaven to be real. So I was relieved when he said, "You can't do just anything you want there. If you want to interrogate the other entities, they look like people, then again they don't. They're all sort of soft-edged and shimmery. Anyway, if you want to ask awkward questions about the place, then you've brought a lot of inappropriate psychodynamics with you," as one of the prefects said to me. "You brought neurotic attachments, all inappropriate in heaven." So the prefects, they look like firefly glows without the fireflies and much larger. They swarm up to you and sort of smooth you out. And you forget all your pushiness, your capacity for violence, and your questions. Your questions are answered only with a sort of impression that the place is indeed something you're supposed to have earned. That it's a higher state of communion with the universe. And that should be enough for you. There's something else kind of funny about the place. I leaned forward, sharply attentive. Buckner said abstractedly, "The entities who are there all the time, who are native to it, well, they look at you like, they don't really snub you or anything. There's nothing unfriendly. Just sort of benevolent surprise, as if they sense that you don't belong there." The tape ended there. Gannick's interviewer hadn't liked the direction Buckner was taking, and we had enough good review from him anyway. The video ended, and the regular transmission on the TV monitors came on. I started to switch it off, but found myself watching. It was a news bulletin. 4 tenements had collapsed an hour earlier in the Bronx. About 270 people were feared injured or dead. Portions of the building just seemed to crumble into dust. The House Commissioner was quoted as saying, "Something similar happened about 2 weeks ago in Chicago, also a low-rent area. We think it's a result of termite damage or acid rain damage to these old buildings. Insects or acid rain or both." Oh, an explanation. Felt good to have an explanation for something like that, even one that felt wrong when you really thought about it. So don't think about it, I told myself. The phone rang. It was Winslow. I didn't put him on screen. I didn't want to see the white face in the black suit. "Mr. Thorpe," he said, "I just want you to know that if you want to tell me anything at all, I will see to it that it'll be safe for you, with respect to prosecution." "You're with the FDA, not the FBI, Winslow. You seem to get them mixed up. Let's just say that this investigation is a little special. If you can tell me about corporeal side effects, the report on Club Eden phenomena, I really don't know what you're talking about," I said sincerely. "If you want to play that game, fine. You'll see who wins." "FDA, Winslow, FDA. The other one is the Federal Bureau of..." He hung up. I shrugged. Then I thought, either he's a loon or we're in trouble and we don't know it. Don't think about it. It's Gannick's problem. I went home. I sat in my confoam chair, nestling into its artificial hug, with the windows opaque and the lights dimmed, playing my hiding game, pretending it was nighttime and dark out. In a way, it was dark in. I sat there sipping Johnny Walker and listening to the TV talk about vacationing in heaven, and I thought, I don't like this life. I don't like this world. So why don't I go? The special report anchorman talked about the Club Eden phenomenon, described the depression and ennui Club Eden returnees slipped into when the afterglow wore off, noted that there was no actual physical addiction. There was an indication of compulsiveness. After you get over the depression, a returnee told the cameras, you get back into the groove of regular life. Everything seems kind of dingy and dirty and tired and stiff for a while. Pretty soon you start to enjoy life again, and you stop yearning for heaven all the time. But as soon as you got the money again, man, you sign up. Certain psychiatrists, whom I knew to be in the pay of Club Eden, made great, soft-edged, rolling claims for the therapeutic benefits of a Club Eden vacation. A few Southern senators muttered darkly about the religious implications. Club Eden had stopped calling the projection plane heaven. That's what everyone thought it was. So the moral majority stamped their feet and pouted. Senator Wexler called for an investigation into the risks, stating it was only a matter of time before the transport rigs went haywire and projected someone into a mountain or the ocean or maybe into hell. If that didn't happen, there was a danger someone might develop bootleg transport rigs. Club Eden had resisted franchising, held on to the monopoly with all the legal strength that the $400 million they'd made could give them. That was a lot of strength. After the special report, I had my third scotch and listened to the regular newscaster dolefully announce that yes, the government had admitted that the country was sliding into a severe recession. Yes, there was a rather unexpected oil shortage, a general energy crunch, epidemic problems with power plant generators around the country, indeed around the world, and the shack towns were growing. I rewound the cassette so I could listen to Buckner again and take notes. Club Eden was hot. Club Eden was the buzz. There was suspicion, outrage, and investigations. But Club Eden kept on through it all, and Gannick and I did our work. Don't take paradise for granted until you've tried Club Eden. And so you think this, a slick Kodachrome photo of glorious South Pacific beach, deep blue skies, crystal waters, emblematically perfect palm trees, is paradise? You haven't tried Club Eden. And Club Eden, who needs drugs? I had my free pass locked up at home. Gannick encouraged me to go. Putchik encouraged me. Putchik went himself sometimes. There was a limit to how often you could go and how long you could stay, something to do with electromagnetic stress on the body, but Putchik went as often as the safety regimen would allow. Gannick didn't go. He said poker at the club with a pretty girl bringing the dry martinis was heaven enough for him. But I want you to go, he said. Okay, Barry? So I sat in my apartment on a Saturday evening a year after Buffy had vanished and came back, thinking about using my pass. Not worrying about Winslow. He'd come only once more, and it had been more of the same. I'd almost forgotten about him. The shack-towners couldn't afford a ticket to heaven, but I had one, so why didn't I use it? I went to the safe I kept the pass in and opened it. I looked at the pass. I couldn't quite... That's when the doorbell rang. Somehow I knew it would be Winslow. Guiltily, I locked the pass away and opened the door for him and stared. He looked different now. The veneer was gone. So was the badge and the Illumitech briefcase. Wore a cheap print-out paper suit and dark glasses. The left lens on the dark glasses was cracked. He smelled like beer, and he listed to the right. We're seeing a different Winslow here, and I liked him better. Gotta talk to you, Winslow said. Come on in and have a drink, I said, as if you needed one. He reached into a pocket and took a gun from it. It was small, a .25. It put a hole right through me at this range. No, you come out. We're going for a drive. We were walking along a pitted gravel road under a lowering gray sky. The clouds at the horizon were reddening in sunset and beginning to shed rain. The red tint, it looked as if the clouds were bleeding. We walked between the shanties of Shacktown, through smells that would have stopped me like a brick wall if the gun hadn't been in Winslow's coat pocket. Winslow was talking with a sort of excessive care that only underlined his drunkenness. Mr. Danville, my supervisor, and I received a sort of anonymous tip, transcription of a conversation between two lawyers, one for a certain Janet Rivera and the other working for Club Eden. Club Eden was offering Janet Rivera a fat settlement, million new bucks, and she took the money and ran. Seems that with a very minor adjustment of the transport rig, or a power surge at the wrong time, the vacationer will arrive in something very like hell. Perhaps it's like this. He gestured vaguely at the packed-in, mud-encrusted, sewage-reeking shanties, the drawn faces peering from beneath plastic sheets nailed over crooked doorways. He went on. Perhaps it's worse. Ms. Rivera was sent to such a hell. Apparently, Miss Rivera barely kept her sanity. Watch out, that dog wants a piece of your thigh. He's wild. It was a bony yellow mongrel, its eyes cloudy, its muzzle ribbed with a snarl. Winslow took the gun from his pocket and said, "This'll feed some of these kids." The gun cracked, making me jump, and as he shot the dog in the head. Its legs buckled and it fell twitching. An old woman, muttering to herself, scurried out and dragged the dead dog by the tail into her hut. The transcript got us interested. Winslow went on as we continued down the road. I glanced over his shoulder and saw a small crowd following us at a careful distance, a convention of scarecrows. We saw our chance to pull down the commissioners. They were corrupt, and we'd had enough. We probed and came up with something we didn't expect. Correspondence between the increase in Club Eden vacationers and the statistical deterioration of the living conditions of the people around them. Putchik knew about it. It was called launchpad charring because they likened the trips to heaven to the launching of rocket ships. The launch pads are charred by rocket ship engines. Thorpe. Club Eden's launch pad is our world. Its charring is the side effects on the world, and the worsening recession, the widening gap between rich and poor. And as it went on, the exchange became more literal. Look, Thorpe. He gestured at something. We'd come to a pit in the earth. It was about 400 yards across and deeper than I could see, coated with fine gray-black dust. The shanties were built right up to its rim. Those nearest it were half fallen, partly sunk in soft ashen ground. Thick, oily drops of rain pattered down, freckling the gravel and drumming tin rooftops, drum-rolling faster and faster as the downpour increased. Under its impact, 3 of the shacks around the rim of the crater collapsed at once, buckling like a shot dog, crumbling like sandcastles under a wave. I heard human voices crying out from the shambles, a dissonant choir, wailing. Glimpsed faces in the muddy ash, faces stamped with resignation, swallowed up a moment later. There are lots more like those, Thorpe, all over the world. They sprang up after Club Eden got really big. Thousands of people have gone into these pits. They're all caught up in some kind of inertia, despair, so they don't fight it. You'd feel the pit pulling at you. He was right. I felt the pit tugging at me, sort of vacuum sucking at my sense of self-worth, my need to survive, pulling me apart, making me want to take a step forward to pitch myself in. There's a federal cover-up of all this, Winslow was saying. Shut up, I said, wrenched my gaze from the pit. Urge to throw myself in it hadn't almost overwhelmed me. Couldn't stand it there anymore. Shoot me or not, I said, I'm leaving. I turned and started walking back the way we'd come. I waited for the gunshot. After a moment, he was walking beside me, hunched against the rain. Once he had to fire into the air to disperse the crowd. In 20 minutes, we were in his car. Perhaps what happened to me in Danville is part of the pattern of effects that hits anyone who doesn't visit heaven, Winslow said. Perhaps it'll hit you, eventually. We sat in his car, listening to the rain hammer the roof. He took off his sunglasses and focused his pink eyes on nothing at all. We were fired. They said we'd gone beyond the confines of our job, which we had. We'd made things up, which we hadn't. He tugged idly at a sleeve of his paper suit. The acid rain had worked on it, and the sleeve came away in his fingers. I've run out of money. My clothes are rotting on my back. What matters, what should have mattered, he looked at me, are those people out there. I didn't say anything. I was choking on what I had seen. He said, Why didn't you take the trip? Just a feeling. It was going too far into pretending that everything was all right. It was going too far to wallow in our private heaven, and there are so many people in hell. It was always wrong. This way I couldn't look away somehow. It was just a step too far. Guilt, I guess, is what it boils down to. You had the right instincts, Thorpe. I knew it when I interviewed you. I could tell the whole thing bothered you. I did my homework on you, with those pieces you wrote a few years back. I know you're not happy about what you do for Gannick, persuading people to squander millions on the pointless consumption of crap. It bothers you. You were addicted to the money. Mostly I was just scared, not having an income big enough to save up a safety margin. I was scared of ending up like those people, so I had to do it. No, you didn't. You don't. You saw what it led to. So, Thorpe, what are you going to do about it? I don't have any proof of bribery or anything else. Let me tell you something. The public doesn't want this thing to get sour. They don't want it questioned or fought. They want heaven. Damn the consequences. And they're paying into a lot of senatorial campaigns to see to it their chances for heaven aren't disturbed. I can't do a goddamn thing. You're wrong, Thorpe. What you can do is precisely a goddamn thing. I knew what he wanted me to do. No reason I should do it. I could get away. I could escape this. I could begin going to heaven myself. I couldn't. I saw the faces whose expressions had gone to dust. I felt the suction of the entropy pit. Having seen that, I was transformed by knowledge. I'd lost my moral innocence, and knowing, I couldn't turn my back on it. What do you want me to do? It starts with a trip to heaven. It's going to be hard, Winslow had said. Maybe the hardest thing you've ever done. It was. It was like someone who loves puppies being forced to throttle one. It's like seeing your mother for the first time in 10 years, and then, though you love her, having to spit in her eye at the moment of reunion. It's like being in heaven and spurning it. The vista was sweet, soft, warm, like living in an impressionist landscape, like great impressionism, never dull. I was nude but unashamed. For the first time I felt nudity without awkwardness. I was drifting weightless over the treetops, basking in just the right amount of sunshine, feeling the caressive music they gave off, and reveling in the surge of joy that was arrival. The sight of friends I'd never known before, awaiting me in the garden, turning with a luminous gladness in their faces, I wrenched myself away and began to seek. The act brought the prefects of heaven. They emanated from the trees like a thought from a synapse, spiraled gracefully around me, soft lights, living questions. They drew closer to assuage the misplaced desire in me. With a crackle of lightning that was an expression of will, I thrust them back, refused to let them soothe me into heaven. What then, they asked. Without speaking, I asked them, how is it we're permitted here at all? For surely this place was something to be earned. You are permitted here because you have come here. The great organizer has made this place. The great organizer is the living principle who creates all orderliness and harmony. You are here in absolute harmony, so the organizer must intend it. I told them what had happened on our world, to the poor, how things had worsened. I asked them why it had happened. There are laws regarding the conservation of matter and energy. If you fill a cup from a bottle, the bottle will be that much emptier. Your world is the bottle. Your privileged are emptying it out. The others must suffer. The machines of metaphysical truth underline physical things. You have tampered with the machines. Your wealthy surround themselves with stolen grace, the subatomic essence of orderliness, stolen from the exploited. The stolen grace prevents them from paying the price, so others must. This place, then, is no supernatural paradise. It is a function of law. All laws incorporating what you call physics, all laws of what you call science, and laws your people haven't learned. This place is a great device. Just as in your world a church is a physical construct to represent the idea of holiness, here we use the physical construct to materialize holiness. Heaven is created by a machine. Yes, a machine birthed by the great machine that is the universe. Then tell me how I can make adjustments to right the imbalance in the machine, to arrest the deterioration on our end of things. The obvious, they said. This is from an interview with Frank Pik in the security ward of Bellevue Hospital's mental health facility. For me, it began with a can opener. I saw a hand holding an old-fashioned can opener, the kind you have to stab into the can. But the hand was stabbing into my belly, opening it like a lid, sawing toward my groin. Through the pain I looked harder at the hand and saw it was my own. I could not say that I had no control over it. I controlled the hand, but I was making it cut me open. I was no masochist. I did not enjoy it. I screamed for it to stop, and I meant it. After a while the wound went away, but of course by then I was making another. Not wanting to, but doing it voluntarily. The paradox sneered at me. At the same time I was watching the great screen where my humiliations and stupidities replayed, and knew my mother watched on another screen as I bought the favors of a small boy in Spanish Harlem. My sensations of humiliation and suffering in all their permutations were not dismissed in the least by time of familiarity. None of it brought me relief or a sense of expiation. Later I found gasoline and tools and glass with dog shit on it. I used all these things to... It was imprinted in my mind when I came back from heaven. The prefects had imprinted the adjustments, the literal electronic adjustments, the equations for the new guidance chips to go into the transport rig. We went from one Club Eden transport station to another across the country, Winslow and I, wearing the Club Eden technicians' jumpsuits I'd stolen, pretending to be doing routine service checks, making the adjustments. We set it up so our readjustments applied exclusively to the new 10-minute vacations, which were available only to the wealthiest vacationers, the industrial barons, their spoiled children, the corporate vampires, the corrupt politicians. And of course there was Pik. We saw to that, because Winslow had spoken to Pik, who had admitted he'd known early on about the side effects of granting first-class tourist passage to heaven. Pik had known and had not cared. Pik was the first to go, the first of many. By degrees it began to work. The suffering of the exploited and the abandoned began to be reversed. Some of the garbage pits became gardens. The ash pits cleared up like the healing of geological cankers. The shacktowners found strength. They organized and built and made demands. There was no utopia there and never will be. But there was dignity. Soon there was food and shelter. We restored the balance. The adjustments worked. It worked because Club Eden had gotten sloppy about security, which meant we were able to send a surprisingly large number of people to hell. Then again, maybe that shouldn't have surprised us.